Some places aren't built. They remember themselves into being. Arendelle is one of them. The kind of town that doesn't appear on a map because the map doesn't exist yet when it does. They call it a forgotten town. Population 312. I didn't mean to find it, but I think it's been waiting for me. I was following a line of little towns that had lost their names to highway bypasses and new maps, and this valley wasn't on my route. Rain pushed in from the west all afternoon, a sheeted gray that softened the ridgeline and darkened the asphalt. I'd meant to sleep in the next county. Then I saw the board at the crest, a bleached plank, hand-painted letters, "Welcome to Erndale, population 312. I pulled over with the camera in my lap, window cracked to the weather. The sign looked old but tended, no graffiti, no bullet pops, only a film of lichen along the beveled edge. I took a photo while the windshield fogged. Somewhere above the clouds, a late sun tried to finish the day. The light stayed undecided, faithful gray. My map app showed blank forest. The car's GPS offered a road number I didn't recognize. I shut the engine and listened. Quiet like pressure. No birds, no far-off truck brakes. Only rain laying itself down leaf by leaf and the tick of the cooling wipers. I turned in. The road narrowed to 2 lanes stitched with tar snakes that shone like dark rivers. Guardrails slumped where the hillside had moved and been nudged back by a crew with a sledgehammer, and a simple idea of straight moss grew on the outside of curves. A strip of reflector tape peeled and flapped when the wind caught it. The drive felt like entering an old photograph, color present, memory color. Half a mile in, a crossroad cut left, marked by a post with an arrow for church and another for lake. Then the trees stood back and the town exhaled. A sloped main street with water running along the gutters, a diner with big windows and steam ghosting the glass, a barbershop pole turning with the resigned patience of duty, 2 pumps under a tin canopy, houses with steep roofs and low porches where paint had chalked down the posts. Every door I saw had a bell tied with twine. I parked across from the diner. The rain thinned to a polite mist. The air smelled like wet coins. Somewhere a screen door snicked shut. Inside, heat rose from the floor, the old way, and the coffee was the kind you pour from stainless steel and forgive. The woman behind the counter wore a pale cardigan and a pin with her name, Ellen. When she asked where I was from, it sounded less like a question than the start of a proper talk. Passing through, I said, "Headed east. I saw your sign." Population sign? One corner of her mouth climbed as if I'd made a small joke we were allowed to keep. "It's precise," I said. "Most towns round to 10s. "We like to be accurate," she said. "Sugar and cream's there. Menu simple." A man in a gray jacket occupied the corner booth the way a cat occupies a windowsill. He raised his cup in the polite salute of small places. A couple in their 50s ate in tandem, forks moving with the rhythm of people who have done most things together. No one looked at a phone. No one seemed to wait for anything that wasn't already here. I ordered eggs and toast and pie to justify the chair. While Ellen cooked, I watched the street. A man dragged a broom along the hardware store ramp. A mail truck stopped at 3 boxes, then eased away. The barber turned off his pole and on again, a reflex, like tapping a barometer. "Where are the kids?" I asked when Ellen returned. The question surprised me as it left my mouth, but it had been gathering for minutes. "School day?" "Not many young ones," she said evenly, setting the plate. "It's the season. People move on when they can. The rest of us keep things steady." "Steady?" "The man in gray," echoed without looking up. The rain lifted and settled again, like a blanket shaken and laid back down. A truck rolled past, with the hush of a vehicle tuned for years to one familiar route. After a while, the bell rang softly, and an older woman came in with a jar of something red wrapped in a dish towel. She set it on the counter, nodded to Ellen, and left without a word. When the door closed, the bell gave one last tremor, as if remembering. I finished the pie and asked about a room. Ellen looked at the man in the corner, then back at me. "The inn's 2 blocks down," she said. "White house with the porch swing. Tell Mrs. Cole you're with the highway crew in case she's fussy about strangers." "I'm not," said a voice from the back that could only be Mrs. Cole, though I hadn't seen her enter. She laughed, a warm, paper-thin sound. But it's nice to hear a man lie politely. Outside again, the town's sounds arranged themselves the way a choir arranges a hum by agreement more than instruction. I walked the 2 blocks and then one more because the street kept inviting me to see what came next. The houses were tidy without being new, each with its own small history visible. A porch swing stained by hands, a window propped with a book. Curtains moved when I passed and then went still. Mrs. Cole's place was exactly what Ellen said. White clapboard, porch swing, a mat asking, "Please, wipe your feet," as if the rain had requested entry first. Inside, the hallway smelled like lemon oil and old novels. She showed me a front room with a view down to Maine, and the diner sign tilted slightly in the window frame. "Pay in the morning," she said. "We do breakfast if you're early. Folks expect you at the diner otherwise. Keeps the rhythm." "The rhythm," I repeated. "Seems like a good rhythm." She nodded, pleased, and left me with a key on a brass tag engraved with the number 4, heavy enough to make the key feel like a promise. I set my bag on the chair, took out my notebook, and wrote the usual notes when a place feels like it wants to keep a story. The color of the streetlight honey, not sodium, the way water gathered at the curb decidedly west side, the thin chime when the diner door opened B above middle C, or close enough for a man who took piano as a kid. When I raised my eyes, a crow crossed the window like a thrown glove and was gone. I realized then I hadn't heard any birds since I turned off the highway. I lay back on the bed without meaning to sleep. The rain worked the eaves in small syllables. Somewhere below, a radio hissed and then settled. I must have closed my eyes 20 minutes, maybe 30. When I woke, the light had slipped a half shade toward evening. It felt like being inside a held breath. I went out again with the camera down to the edge of town where the road rose and bent. From there, I could see the welcome sign I'd photographed earlier, a pale tooth in the dim. It read the same as before, careful as an account ledger. Population 312. A wind came up the valley, not strong enough to move branches, just enough to suggest a decision had been made somewhere else. I took another picture anyway. Morning came without sound. The rain hadn't stopped, it had simply forgotten how to fall. Mist hung in the street like the breath of something asleep. From my window, I could see the diner's sign flicker, Ellen's, and the empty porch swing at Mrs. Cole's house drift a few inches with no wind at all. I checked my phone, no bars, no timestamp, only the faint hum of static from the speaker, like the phone was listening to itself. I went out anyway. The street smelled of iron and wet dust. When I reached Maine, every door stood just barely open, like someone had stepped through a moment earlier. A delivery truck idled at the curb, driver's seat empty. Its exhaust steamed into the fog, curling in perfect rings that didn't break apart. At 9 o'clock sharp, the church bell rang once. 9:05, it rang again. By 9:10, the sound stopped so suddenly that the silence seemed to click. I didn't have a watch, I counted by instinct. Later, when I walked that same street again, the same pattern returned, each minute repeating exactly. I thought about the old phrase, a town with rhythm. Arundale's rhythm was too precise. I passed the barber shop. Inside, the same man from yesterday sat under the same towel, eyes closed. The barber's scissors snipped in slow repetition, silver flashes at the same interval. A transistor radio hissed on the counter. Between the static, a voice whispered what might have been a number. 312, 312, 312. When I looked back through the window a heartbeat later, the chair was empty and the radio had gone quiet. At the diner, Ellen poured coffee before I asked. The slice of pie was already on the counter. She smiled like I'd been a regular for years. "Rough night?" she asked. "I slept fine," I lied. "Feels quieter today." "It's always quiet," she said, "except when it isn't." I tried to laugh. She didn't. The bell over the door chimed and the same couple from yesterday came in, wet umbrellas folded tight. They sat in the same booth. He ordered ham and eggs, she ordered oatmeal. Word for word, the same exchange as before. I waited for some variation, a hesitation, a new question, but none came. When I paid, Ellen pressed a folded map into my hand. "People like souvenirs," she said. The paper was blank except for the outline of a single road looping back on itself. No symbols, no scale. At the bottom, someone had written "Stay on Route 312." When I looked up, Ellen was wiping the counter that was already clean. Back at the inn, I listened to the radio I kept for field notes. Most bands were dead air. Around midnight, I found a faint signal. 312 kilohertz. A woman's voice whispered through the static, breathy and close, repeating the word "stay" every few seconds. I recorded 30 minutes before the batteries died. When I played the tape back, the voice had changed. It was mine, slower, as if played underwater. Outside, fog pressed against the windows like fabric. Street lights burned amber halos that reached no farther than the sidewalk. I opened the door to the porch and heard footsteps behind me, deliberate and bare. Turning, I saw only my own prints in the damp wood. The air had weight, even breathing made a sound. Day 2, or maybe still day 1. I walked to the edge of town, passing the hardware store where the broom leaned in exactly the same position. The man sweeping it yesterday wasn't there, but the wet pattern of bristles on concrete looked freshly made. I followed the main road until the welcome sign appeared through fog. The wood gleamed with dew, the same careful lettering. Population 312. For a reason I can't explain, I touched the board. It was warm. Footsteps shuffled in the ditch behind me. I turned, but the sound belonged to nothing. The trees stood still as photographs. I raised the camera, took a frame, lowered it, and in the playback screen there was a shape at the sign's base, faint and human-sized, watching me. When I looked again, only fog. Back in town, everyone acted as if it were early evening, though the sky still held morning gray. Lamps glowed in windows. The rhythm continued, the old man on the bench, the mail truck, the bell. I timed it again, and each moment arrived with mechanical accuracy. It wasn't routine, it was repetition. That night I wrote in my notebook, "Nothing here ages. The paint never peels, the fog never burns off. Maybe the number on the sign isn't a count. Maybe it's a measure of time or memory. Population 312 moments, looping." I stopped when the radio clicked on by itself. The dial spun to 312 kilohertz. My own voice, recorded earlier, came through again, but speaking a new line. "You shouldn't have counted." The light flickered once, twice, Down the street, the diner's windows flashed like lightning, though the sky remained still. For a second, I saw the silhouettes of people inside, dozens more than there should have been, standing shoulder to shoulder, facing the glass. Then darkness returned. I wanted to leave that night, to take the road out, but every turn brought me back to Maine. The same diner, the same pump, the same quiet houses, the same sign gleaming at the curb. When I finally parked, the clock on the dash read 9:05 p.m. It had read 9:05 p.m. the last 4 times I'd checked. I sat in the idling car, listening to the faint voice from the radio say my name. Rain began again, softly, as if the town had remembered how. By morning, the rain had vanished, but the air felt heavier, like water suspended mid-breath. The street glistened though no clouds lingered, and the hills beyond town were wrapped in a pale film that erased their edges. It wasn't fog exactly, more like distance turned solid. I went down to the diner again. The same cars sat by the curb, same drops of water on their windshield. When I opened the door, the bell chimed the same note, perfect as a recording. Only one thing was different. Walter, the mechanic who had nodded to me on my first night, wasn't there. His usual seat at the counter sat empty, a coffee cup beside it, steam still rising. Ellen glanced at it once, frowned, and went on pouring refills as if she hadn't noticed. "Morning," I said. She looked at me with the kind patience you offer a visitor who's asked the same thing before. "Morning," she echoed. "How'd you sleep?" "Fine," I lied again. "Where's Walter today?" She hesitated, a blink too long. "Walter," she repeated. "Don't think we have one of those here." She smiled afterward, but it felt rehearsed. When I stepped outside, a shape crossed behind the gas pumps, a man about Walter's height, in coveralls, wiping his hands on a rag. "Hey," I called, walking over. He turned, same face, same eye, but the name on his patch read ELI. "You need help?" he asked, friendly as yesterday. I looked at the grease-stained rag, the scuffed boots. "I thought your name was Walter." "Don't think so," he said, chuckling. "Never been good with names, though." Behind him, the garage door stood open. Inside was a single car, hood raised, headlights still on, though the battery wasn't connected. The beams lit the walls in a dull orange, flickering faintly, as if reflecting an unseen fire. I left without another word. By afternoon, the temperature had dropped, though the sun shone in a way that felt false, more illumination than warmth. People moved along the sidewalks with steady, unhurried steps. Everyone carried something: a folded paper, a broom, a letter. Each object was plain, but all were held the same way, both hands close to the chest, as though ceremonial. I tried to speak to a man sweeping his porch. "Do you know what happened to Walter?" He looked up, confused. "Don't think we've met anyone by that name." "But the sign," I said, "Population 312. Has that ever changed?" He frowned. Why would it? When he turned back to sweeping, I noticed he wasn't moving dust. There was nothing on the porch. The broom brushed air over and over, rhythm perfect. At dusk, I decided to leave. The road out of town climbed gently, turning twice before the trees closed in. But halfway up the first turn, something rippled. The asphalt looked damp, but it wasn't water. It shifted, like the reflection of a reflection, the way heat dances above pavement. I kept driving. At the second curve, I came back to Main Street. It wasn't confusion, it was geometry refusing to cooperate. I drove again, slower this time, marking each mailbox, each bend. And again I returned to the diner, headlights catching the same rain streaks across its windows. Ellen stood at the door as I stopped the car. She smiled like she'd been waiting. Sometimes the roads bend wrong, she said softly. It's best not to push them. Her eyes were pale blue, almost translucent. For the first time I noticed the faint hum beneath her words. A tone like an engine idling far underground. That night I couldn't sleep. The inn's clock ticked in reverse for a few minutes, then stopped altogether. At exactly 9 o'clock, the church bell rang once. 9:05 again. 9:10, silence. I went outside, drawn by the stillness. The moon hung behind gauze clouds, huge and white, but it gave no light. Down the street, the hardware store glowed softly. Its door was ajar. Inside, the aisles were empty except for a single photograph lying on the counter. It showed me, standing in front of the Population 312 sign, camera raised. The photo had been taken from a few feet behind my shoulder. I hadn't felt anyone there that day. My fingers trembled. Beneath the photo was a slip of paper. Count carefully. I looked outside. A figure stood by the street lamp, motionless, watching. It had my height, my jacket, even the same way of holding the camera strap. I blinked. It was gone. Near midnight, I found myself at the edge of the cemetery. The gate hung half open, its chain rusted but unbroken. The ground smelled of wet iron. Rows of stones curved along the hill like vertebrae. The names were simple. Family lines that had repeated through generations. Cole, Simmons, Reeves. At the far edge, half sunk in mud, one stone bore no name. Just a carved number, 312. The rain began again, thin and deliberate. I ran my hand over the surface. Beneath the number, new letters glistened in the lamplight, freshly cut, edges pale. My name. The sound that came next wasn't thunder. It was something lower, like earth exhaling. The ground trembled once and stilled. I stumbled back toward the street. Lights burned in every window now, all at the same brightness. The people inside stood motionless, silhouettes facing outward, each one watching the road. At the end of Main, the Population 312 sign gleamed. But the number was fading, the paint running in slow streaks as if bleeding through wood. For a moment it read 311, then blurred again into a smear of gray. I remember whispering into the night, "Who's missing?" A voice answered, not from behind me or from any single direction, but from within the fog itself, a chorus speaking with one breath. "No one's missing. Not anymore." When dawn finally came, I woke on the porch of the inn, clothes damp, shoes caked with dirt. The town was quiet again, washed clean. The church bell stood still. In the distance, I heard an engine. A car. Headlights swept the street, a stranger driving in, slowing at the sign. Through the morning haze, I saw the letters clear and new. Population 312. I reached for my camera out of habit. It was gone. In its place, on the table beside me, lay a key with a brass tag engraved 5. Mrs. Cole's house only had 4 rooms. The car that came over the ridge was the color of rainwater. It slowed by the pumps, blinked its hazards once, and cut the engine like a man holding his breath for the first time in a long time. The driver stepped out, mid-30s, road tired, the look of someone who misread a map and decided not to argue with it. He shaded his eyes toward the diner. He didn't see me. From my porch chair, I tried to stand and felt the town in my knees, as if someone had screwed them gently into the boards overnight. Mrs. Cole's door opened behind me. "Breakfast?" she asked, as though this were any morning at all. "How many rooms do you have?" I asked without turning. 4, she said. I could hear the smile in her voice. Been 4 as long as I can remember. I looked at the brass tag on the table, 5, and slipped it into my pocket. I'll eat at Ellen's. Good, she said. Keeps the rhythm. The newcomer crossed the street, paused at the window as if checking himself for a reflection, and pushed in. The bell chimed that familiar B, and the sound laced the morning together. I followed at a distance that felt prescribed. Inside, everything had been set before we arrived. Coffee steamed at the corner seat. A plate warmed the counter without eggs on it. Ellen looked up, unsurprised to see 2 men where 1 cup waited. We can make more, she said softly, already reaching for a second mug. The stranger gave the room a tourist nod, the kind you offer when you've entered a photograph you don't belong to. Passing through, he told Ellen, headed east, saw your sign. By the time the season ends, the lake barely remembers people. The air turns thin and cold, the rain steady, and the sound of water carries farther than it should. And beside everything had been set before we arrived. Coffee steamed at the corner seat. A plate warmed the counter without eggs on it. Ellen looked up, unsurprised to see 2 men where 1 cup waited. We can make more, she said softly, already reaching for a second mug. The stranger gave the room a tourist nod, the kind you offer when you've entered a photograph you don't belong to. Passing through, he told Ellen, headed east. Saw your sign. An Appalachian sign, she asked, and the corner of her mouth climbed, and it was all so nearly a repeat that I felt the world settle into its haunches. It's precise, he said. Most towns round to 10s. We like to be accurate, she said, and poured my cup before his. He glanced at me, friendly, measuring. Been here long? A day, I said. The word didn't feel like time. It felt like distance measured in circles. He took the other stool. I'm Nate, he said, offering a hand. His palm was cold and damp, a road map folded too often. Doesn't matter, I said, before I could help it. The sentence arrived like a line I'd rehearsed all night. The inn has rooms. 4, he joked. I stared at his mouth and waited for the town to answer through it. Nothing came, only his own small laugh, human and unremarkable. He looked relieved that the joke had survived the fog. Outside, the bell tower marked 9, 9:05, 9:10. The silence made the diner feel round and finished. I ate because that is what you do when someone has already put a plate in front of you in a town that keeps account. When the stranger left to fetch his bag, I followed him to the sidewalk. The light had a slightly greener cast now, like water in a deep bowl. He looked up the street toward the inn. How far? He asked. 2 blocks, I said. White House, porch swing. He squinted past me, then checked his phone and frowned. No time, he said. No bars. You'll get used to it. The words were not advice. They were weather. He zipped his jacket, then hesitated. You from around here? The better answer would have been no. I wanted to say I arrived 2 days ago, and the cemetery has my name on a stone, and your reflection stands 3 seconds out of phase. Instead, I said, I keep things steady. Steady, he repeated, like a man trying on a suit jacket. It fit him. He headed for the inn. I walked the opposite way, toward the edge of town. The sign waited at its post, dew beating in the carved grooves, the wood as warm as memory. Population 312, the number looked newly painted, the strokes strong, the edges unfrayed. A moth landed on the 2 and beat its powdered wings once, twice, then went still. Beyond the sign, the road rose toward the ridge where the world should have widened. It did not. The same curve, the same shoulder scar. I turned back and counted porches as I went. 1, 2, 3. The bench where the old man sat at 9. The hardware steps with their broom shadow. The barber shop with its towel folded the way a tide turns. By the time I reached the church green, the stranger had reappeared with his bag. He had chosen a room by the window. I could tell by the way he looked back down at us to check what he had chosen. He lifted 2 fingers in a shy salute. I didn't wave back. In the afternoon, the radio in my pocket woke on its own, dial sliding, needle trembling like a compass near iron. 312 kilohertz. Static. Then a voice I knew too well. My voice. Recorded. My vowels slowed and dragged through velvet. It said, "We replace." I pressed the radio to my ear. The tape rasped with breath. The sentence repeated more intimately now, as if spoken against my throat. "We don't add, we replace." When I lifted my head, the stranger stood beside me at the edge of the green, his eyes on the bell tower. "Pretty place," he said. "Feels quiet." "It's always quiet," I said, "except when it isn't." He laughed, and the town tried to sound on and kept it. Evening arrived the way it had been arriving here long before I knew the word for it, without angles, without hurry. Lamps brightened in windows simultaneously, a single inhale distributed among glass. The barbershop pole spun. The mail truck rolled 3 boxes forward and stopped. At the diner door, Ellen propped the bell so it wouldn't chime and stared out as if counting something only she could see. I walked him as far as the pumps. "If you plan to leave," I said, "go before dark." "Roads are bad?" he asked. "They're wrong," I said. He pointed toward the ridge. "Looks simple enough. I'll try in the morning." We stood listening to the air finish a thought. Somewhere, a screen door forgot to shut and then remembered. The church bell gave a half breath and decided against it. He stuck out his hand again, and I took it, because all rituals matter in a place that runs on them. His grip had warmed. "See you tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow," I agreed. He went up the end steps. The porch swing moved an inch with no wind. Mrs. Cole opened the door before he knocked, already saying his name. She called him Walter. He flinched as if corrected, then the flinch was gone. I turned toward the sign one last time that day. The number didn't blur. It didn't drip. It didn't flicker. It changed the way a clock changes. It simply was, and then it was otherwise. Population 313. No paint tackiness. No fresh edges. The wood accepted the fact of it as if it had always been true. Down the street, I felt the town regard me. Through glass. Through curtains. Through the grills of idling engines. The sensation wasn't hostile. It was administrative. I walked back to my room. The brass tag in my pocket had warmed to my skin. Inside, the hallway smelled like lemon oil and old novels and something faintly salt, as if a sea pressed 1,000 miles beneath the floorboards. On the dresser lay my camera again, cleaned, strap folded to a precise symmetry I'd never managed. The lens cap was off. The last photo showed the diner door with the bell tied back, and beyond it a reflection of the street that did not quite match the street. One extra window, one missing car, a man in a porch chair I did not recognize until I did. I set the camera down and opened the notebook where I keep the first line for every place I think might keep me. Some towns remember themselves into being. I added a second line beneath it, neat as a ledger entry. Some people keep the count steady. Outside, rain began softly, then more softly still, until it wasn't sound anymore but a texture stitched into the dark. The radio on the table purred at 312 kilohertz, then quieted without my hand. At 9 the bell rang once. At 9:05 it rang again. At 9:10 the silence clicked into place. I lay back and let the room take my weight the way a lake takes a stone, wholly without splash. They say some towns never die. I suppose I'll keep the count steady for a while.